Coming up on this episode of Flirtations, we welcome Cody Daigle-Orians to the show to have a conversation with us about aromanticism, asexuality, and demisexuality in dating. And together, we'll talk about what it means to be aro, ace, and demi, and how these identities impact dating and relationships. We'll also explore how to make meaningful connections out there dating and when to share your identity with someone. Do you put it on your dating profile? Spoiler alert! No. We'll also address the stigma and acceptance surrounding these identities, providing insights on how to find supportive communities and how to work through what to do if you're feeling unsure. Could these identities be fluid too? Finally, and perhaps most importantly, we'll offer tips on how to date with more confidence, embracing who you are and what you need. So, whether you identify as aro, ace, demi, or are simply looking to understand these experiences better, this episode is for you. Let's do this, flirties.
I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. Hello, my name is Benjamin. I'm the flirt coach and a gay Libra. Everyone has an inner flirt.
Hey, flirty.
Live, laugh, flirt.
Work the flirt.
Work the flirt. Delulu is the Salulu. Expert on the flirt.
Hey, flirty. There's always another flirt.
Everyone has an inner flirt. Get out of your head and into the flirt.
Flirties, up for discussion on the show today. We're going to be talking about aroace, asexuality, and demisexuality with our guest and author of the Ace and Aro Relationship Guide, Cody Daigle-Orians. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I am equally as thrilled, as I think this is going to be very much a learning experience for me, as these are not topics that I talk a lot about, but I get a lot of questions. And I was doing a Flirt Friday recently, as I do on Fridays, answering flirting and dating questions. And you were requested for the show.
Hey, you got to love that. That's all right. Thank you, whoever that was.
Do it. And so I did. I slid right into the DMs and we chatted and set this up. And here we are.
Awesome. I love it.
All right. We're going to be getting into so much. Lots of questions came through. But first things first, if you'd like to share a little bit more about yourself and your work with the Flirties.
Yeah. So my name is Cody. My pronouns are they, them. I'm best known on the internet as Ace Dad Advice. 3 years ago, I started creating content online that introduced asexuality and aromanticism and also being agender to people, answering their basic questions and giving advice on how to live your best aspec life. And that has kind of turned into a thing I'm doing now. So I get to do talks and I get to do events. I've written 2 books and I get to sort of travel around the country and help people better understand the communities I'm a part of and the lives that we lead.
Awesome. I'm so glad you're here, as I think this is going to be an amazing resource for the Flirties, and I'll send them your way to your socials, to your book as well, because just as we were setting this up, I know there's going to be, like in the coaching world, we have the levels of awareness is a thing. So some people are going to be listening to this and you know what? I know I'm asexual, or I know I'm demisexual. Give me the dating tips. Give me the flirting tips. That's what I need.
Right.
We're going to get there. You're going to get those. And then I know there's going to be some Flirties listening that are like, I'm not sure. Maybe not. I have some questions. So let's start with some of the basics with aroace first. Aromanticism. Am I even saying it correctly? And what is it?
Yeah, so aromanticism, the short form is just aro. Aroace describes folks who are both ace and aro. That's like just a shortened form of the two together. Okay. Yeah, so aromanticism is a romantic orientation. It describes people who don't or rarely experience romantic attraction. That can look like a lot of different things. So aromanticism expresses itself in a wide variety of ways, but it talks about that specific experience of either not experiencing a romantic attraction to other people at all, or to experience it in a sort of like a lesser way, or it being a rarer experience.
Okay, that makes sense. And I got this question from a flirty. I think fits in really well here. And speaking to attraction, so does the person that may be aro, does that mean they don't experience attraction, or talking a little bit more to this, to the romantic piece of this?
Yeah. So if I can have like a chunk. So the
Yeah.
best way to kind of like dial in on attraction, because attraction is kind of a confusing word. It gets used
Yeah.
in a lot of different ways.
Okay.
And so for both romantic and sexual attraction, you can I sort of break it down into three components. There is arousal, which is like the body having an in the moment awakening to that, to wanting that. That's like the physical experience that you're having. So there's arousal, and that can also be romantic too. Like we have like physical stuff that happens when we're experiencing romantic attraction. Then that connects to like the notion of libido, which would describe one's intensity and frequency of that experience of arousal. So if you say you have a high libido, that means that you're experiencing sexual or romantic attraction often and intensely. Low libido would be the opposite. Attraction describes the direction of that libido and that experience of arousal. So where is this experience and the frequency and intensity of this experience going? Is it aimed at someone of the same gender, aimed at someone of any gender? Is it aimed nowhere in particular at all? And so ace and arrow people most connect to that. It doesn't really go anywhere at all. So you can have those physical things happening to you, but without that like directionality, without it going towards something or being aimed somewhere, that doesn't sort of fit in like where like allosexual or alloromantic people fall. So like most ace and arrow folks may connect most deeply with that. I may have these experiences, but there's no direction to it.
Okay. I want to stay here for a minute talking to Arrow a little bit more, and how the Arrow person may connect, how they may form relationships if they're dating. Some ways that they just explore and show interest that isn't maybe necessarily the quote unquote typical ways of being, attraction, or I'm turned on by you, right? Something like that. A lot of the ways we think of interest being explored in dating.
Yeah, so arrow folks are just aromanticism describes their experience of that one particular kind of attraction. But for arrow folks, that other kinds of attraction are possible and can be part of their experience. So they may be sexually attracted to other people. They may experience like aesthetic attraction, like in the way somebody looks like. We're connecting to people emotionally or intellectually. There are these other like components of attraction or ways that one can be attracted that are available to arrow people. So all of those become like the toolkit to sort of develop relationships of all kinds. But there are, in some arrow people do still engage in romantic relationships. They'll seek them out because while they may not feel the attraction that grounds that, they're comfortable I don't want to say the performance because that makes it sound like it's fake, but in the execution of those relationships, they're comfortable with that practice. It's something they're fine to do for a partner or for themselves. So there are lots of ways that even if you don't experience romantic attraction, lots of ways to build connections and form relationships.
Fantastic. And we're going to be coming back to some tips and strategies for doing just that. As now I want to ask you about asexuality. And so I think we're grounded in our discussion thus far of what arrow looks like. We've defined it, how this person is showing up in dating perhaps. And so for the person that's asexual, what is that?
So asexuality describes the not or rarely experienced sexual attraction. So for folks who don't experience it at all or do in sort of certain circumstances or rarely, they may fall under the asexual umbrella. The same sort of rules apply. There are still lots of ways for an asexual person to form connections and build connections. And also asexual folks have a wide variety of relationships to sex and sexual relationships. So some ace folks do have sex, even though the majority of ace folks don't. For some ace folks, it is part of the relationships they build and the lives they have. So again, just like being arrow, being ace, there are a wide range of ways to express that. And that there's nothing that's like there's no inherent one way to build relationships as an ace person.
Okay. Okay. And I'm curious now, as I was blending the two terms earlier. So the term aro ace, someone may identify as aro and ace. I'm curious now, do you see a lot of where someone may identify as both, or do you think you can be one or the other? Are there sort of like any rules, so to speak, around that?
No, there are a nice significant chunk of folks who do identify under both umbrellas and do claim both communities as their own,
Okay.
and within that, there are all the shades that exist within the individual communities. Those exist for aroace folks as well.
Okay.
There's a lot of variety among ace and aroace folks, and like what that looks like, how that's expressed, and how that's lived.
Okay. Okay, really helpful, because I know there's going to be at least a few flirties listening that are thinking like, oh, do I have to, can I be one or the other? Is like, do I have to be both? And so you can really play in this space as you really kind of come to terms and get to know yourself. And are these, would you say they're identities, like sexual identities, or how might you describe them a little bit?
Well, so asexuality and aromanticism are identities in the same way that we might think about gay, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual. They are these words that describe both like one's embodied experience in relation to different forms of attraction, and they also then contain sort of community connotations. They contain political connotations as well. Like those words work in a similar way. They're just defining different areas of how people can relate to different kinds of attraction.
All right. And I want to ask now, because this question came through, is do you think that being aro and ace or ace may do they develop in certain parts of our lives, like younger, or could we come to terms with this maybe as we get older? I'm curious if you see in your work how people start to maybe evolve to just identify in these ways.
Yeah, I feel like they're like sort of similar trajectories to other queer identities that especially that we've seen kind of historically. Some folk, the internet has been a really great tool to help people identify themselves as ace and aro more readily than in the past. The communities do skew more young because a lot of the community that exists for ace and aro folks do exist online. There aren't like and they're not in away from the keyboard spaces like in other kind of parts of the queer community. But yeah, there are lots of entry points in. I came out as ace as an older person. I didn't realize I was ace until I was 41. I was having an ace experience. I just never came into contact with the language of it or representations of it where I could identify, I could like see myself in something. That didn't happen for me until I was 41. So there are a lot of folks who are coming to being ace and aro as older adults because they're encountering it for the first time. Young people are very lucky. They're in spaces like Tumblr and Instagram and TikTok, and they're encountering these ideas and these words much younger. So they're able to see themselves more readily as a younger age. But the key thing is like being able to see it in the world. If you have to find some way to encounter it, and luckily there are more ways to do that for more people.
100%. Yeah, this is one of the ways that social media is really, really helping us. If you are from a smaller town, or maybe you grew up in a culture or in a religion that was, sort of relationships were defined, you sort of had this trajectory laid out in front of you. It's like you don't know what you don't know. And to see what's possible, you can then start to find your communities. Online communities are fantastic. You can get to know yourself a little bit better in that way as well. So one of the many reasons I love social media.
Me too. Me too.
Okay. We're going to demisexuals. We're getting to you because I identify as a demisexual, but a few more questions here. And this one came through from a flirty. And also I pulled this from your YouTube. I wanted to ask about this distinction from asexuality and just disinterest in sexual activity, or having maybe exploring physical touch in some way. Is there a difference between the two?
Yeah, I think like fundamentally, yes, sure. There is a difference. I always hesitate to sort of say, look for these three check mark things,
Yeah.
and then this means you're this or this means you're that.
Yeah.
Because identity is an incredibly personal experience, and people come to terms and come to identities through their own journeys. But I think if there's like a very useful way to kind of to mark what path you might be more worth pursuing for you, asexuality or just a disinterest or maybe low libido, is to think about what like the patterns of your life have been. Sexual orientation describes a pattern of experience over time, no matter what sexual orientation that is. And so if you were kind of looking at your life and there is like you're in a weird blip in an otherwise sexual or romantic experiencing pattern, then it might more be like just something has changed and there's something different and you're maybe just experiencing this physical or that's this kind of thing. If maybe there is a pattern of experience over time where you have either always felt this or this is something that has been going on for a while and you feel some sense of like that not being a problem, then asexuality or aromanticism may be a path worth exploring, because that might be a way to sort of talk about that experience and then find community with other people who share that experience. But I feel like that component of pattern is really important. I think people like freak out when something changes in their lives or they have like one weird off experience that doesn't match up with what they think. And they're like, oh no, am I something new? Not really. Every human sexuality is fluid, and you may have those weird blip moments, but the pattern is what's important, and the identity language we use often describes that pattern.
Wildly helpful, Cody, because I'm thinking about the dater that is, they're burnt out, they're overwhelmed, they're frustrated, they're like, oh, I'm deleting the apps, I'm not interested and attracted to anybody, I'm asexual now. I've been that dater, and I've definitely heard that many, many times. And so I think it's really speaking to the pattern, how you feel and what's been consistent for you, and just start what really feels right.
Yeah, and and also if you do grab asexual as a term for you and you're like, yeah, no, this is the truth for me right now, and then like 6 months later like, no, maybe not, that's totally okay.
True.
Like labels are not boxes that we fit, they're tools, not tests. So if they're useful for you in a season of your life, that's also fine too. But I think like when that anxiety comes in about like I have to identify myself, if you're feeling that, then look for patterns. That's the most helpful thing if that's starting to really stress you out. But like use the words that help you. If new words help you later, then take those on.
Yeah, really speaking to the fluidity. It's like it's not like you check the box for yourself and then you have to stay in that box forever.
Yeah, no. Who wants to be in a box forever? That's how uninteresting.
Not me. I'm
and boring.
claustrophobic just thinking about it.
Exactly.
Boxes are for present. And maybe some other things like cereal. I don't know. Let's talk about, for the demisexuals listening, because I got a few questions about demisexuality as well. So really excited to bring that into this conversation. How would you define or describe demisexuality?
So demisexuality is a bit of language that came up from the ACE community itself to describe a very particular kind of experience along that ACE spectrum. So there were folks in the ACE community who did not experience sexual attraction as sort of their baseline experience, and it wasn't something that was kind of part of their experience until they were forming connections or bonds with other people. And then sexual attraction became something possible in their relationships with them. And so that became, demisexual encompasses that particular experience under the ACE umbrella.
Okay. Really helpful, because this is speaking to what we talked about a little bit earlier. It's like I kind of felt for a long time like something was wrong with me. And I didn't, when I started to learn about the terms aro and ace, I was like, not quite. Like that doesn't feel right for me. I really don't feel aligned with those terms. And even, knowing that they can be fluid, I just, it wasn't really right for me. And then when I learned about demisexuality, I was like, oh, yes. Yes, the attraction, that the sexual interest, all of that very possible, but I really need to have that connection with somebody first. It's like for that door to be unlocked. Like, oh, there it is. Now I can walk through. But I
Hmm.
need to really just build that connection, build that trust with somebody. And as I identify as a gay man, like we live in a very, I would say more widely for everyone, a very hypersexual culture.
Hmm. And for
And
gay men,
when,
it's more
oh
hypersexual. Like it's
my
very
God.
hypersexual. Yeah.
Oh God, it's next level. And when you just don't feel like you fit in to that world, it feels very exclusionary. And so I want to speak to that experience of maybe a little bit of loss or grief that may come up in this process of just learning how you like to connect and how you identify, feeling like you don't always fit in.
Yeah, I mean, I relate to that really strongly because I came out as gay at 18. And so
Mhm.
that was like the language I used to understand. That's the only language I had available that made sense for the way I was feeling and the way I was kind of wanting
Yeah.
to have a life. And so I spent the first 20 years of my life understanding myself as a gay person, but like a bad one, that I was lousy at it.
Mm,
Because I didn't have any other way to articulate or frame the way I was relating to sex and the way I was wanting to have it and the
yeah.
way I was like connecting to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I did finally come out as ace, it was both a really happy experience for me, but also it felt like a confirmation that I was in fact a bad gay at first. Like I did have that like feeling of like, oh well, I guess I'm never really going to fit into this community that I thought I was a part of
Mhm.
for a long time. And there was I like the use of the word grieving. Like there was grieving a person that I wasn't ever going to be,
Yeah.
and that I didn't have the
Yeah.
potential to be. But
Yeah.
finding the language that does fit me, finding out the thing that I am actually good at being on a daily basis has been like much more positive than that like process of loss. But
Mm.
that sense of like loss was an important part of my coming out process.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Just our shares so much because I know there are going to be flirties listening all over the world that are finding themselves in this conversation and identifying with our experiences. And so I really hope and I believe it's going to be really, really helpful. And I want to spend one more moment here talking about the identities before we get into
Mhm.
some dating and flirting strategies, as
Cool.
this is flirtations. For the person that is sort of struggling with the label a little bit, maybe the acceptance, yeah, even some of the stigma that might come along with this. We talked about that for a moment just now, but I wanted to, yeah, follow that up with this question for the flirty that's like, what are people going to think about me if they feel like they're going to limit themselves, their own potential dating, making relationships. Yeah, offering some insight there.
Yeah, coming out as ace or arrow or anywhere on the aspec spectrums, it's challenging because you are sort of you're identifying yourself and living a life that a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah.
So, unlike for most queer people, it is a challenge and a risk and a fear to just come out as queer to people that
Mm,
you don't know.
mm, mm.
There's an added component for ace and arrow folks because we have to come out as queer and then also fear having to explain it to them or fear like what misconceptions somebody might have about it. Like most
Yeah.
people don't understand what it means to be ace and arrow. So yeah, there is some baggage and stigma that comes along with being ace and arrow now because so few people understand what those words mean. And
Mm,
what most people have are just the misconceptions and stereotypes about what being
yes.
ace and arrow means.
Yeah.
If those things are really daunting to you and are really scary and you just don't want to deal with that publicly, it's totally okay to understand yourself internally and within safe people, but
Mm,
not share that with the world. Like you're not obligated to come out to everyone as an ace and arrow person if that is just like a really complicated thing to do.
yeah.
If the language of being ace or arrow helps you understand yourself and helps you within yourself and your intimate relationships feel better and feel safer and feel good and feel confident, that's awesome. There's no
Mhm.
need for anybody else to be a part of that process until you decide other people need to be a part of that process.
Yes. Yes. Really, really good. Because I know there's going to be, yes, some flirties listening, and I've felt this way as well as a demisexual that's a homosexual, it's like, yeah, you come out once, but then it's like, as queer people, we come out over and over and over and over and over again.
All the
Like
time.
every time, oh my God. Like it's like it is not this one-time experience of, oh, I'm out. It's like, no, you're kind of coming for the rest of your life. And then
Yeah.
if you identify now as demisexual or ace or aro, now you have this kind of a second coming out. And so I wanted to speak to this experience of not feeling like you have to explain yourself, you have to justify yourself, right? Like you get to identify in the way you want to, that makes you feel good, that you feel comfortable and feel confident in. Yeah, you don't have to offer an explanation for that.
No, and you don't have to internalize other people's misconceptions either. So
yeah,
if people don't understand it, or people do have a feeling about it, that's their business. That's not yours. If you understand yourself and like what you see, that's really all. That's all that matters. Don't internalize the misconceptions or stereotypes or the lack of understanding that other people have. You don't have to own that. That's their thing.
Yes. Yes, you don't have to own that. All right, let's get into some dating, flirting tips, strategies, some advice here for aro, ace, demisexuals. Starting out, I got this question from a flirty who's dating. They didn't say how they may identify, but dating online, they have a dating app profile. Is this something like, when in the dating process, if you're dating, may you tell someone how you identify? Do you put it right out there on the profile? Do you wait and meet? Is it in those first few dates? What do you think?
Yeah, so I feel like disclosure is a very personal thing, particularly for ace and aro people, because it's complicated. I have to tell you that I'm ace and aro, and I likely will have to sort of like do a gender sexualities 101 class with you to help you to understand it. Like, there's a big commitment that goes into that. And ultimately, everybody's ace and aro experience requires explanation. If I tell you that I'm ace, I also have to tell you what that means. And so that means I have to talk about how I have sex. If I have sex, I have to talk about how my relationships work. And those are very private and like that's personal stuff. So I feel like we don't have to feel obligated to put that up front and have that be the first thing that's out there for everybody to see. We can decide when it makes sense for us in this particular interaction to share that and have that conversation. If I'm on a dating app, everybody doesn't need to know that I'm ace, because when I have been on the apps and I have revealed that I'm ace, I've gotten a lot of like really crappy comments from people and a lot of sort of like rude, dismissive, aphobic stuff.
Yeah.
I can decide if a connection merits me explaining how my relationships work and how my sex life works. If you're aro, same thing. You can, when a conversation merits that, when a person merits that sharing, then you can bring that into the conversation. As long as you aren't setting up false expectations about who you are and what you can do and what you will be open to. Like if you're sort of like heavy sex flirting with somebody that you have no intention of ever having sex with them, that's not very fair. That's misrepresenting yourself. But you don't have to feel like your asexuality or your aromanticism needs to be the first thing on the plate. It can come up when it needs to come up and when you feel comfortable sharing that.
Yeah, so good. Heavy sex flirting as a demisexual. I feel like you were talking to me when you said that, Cody.
I mean, look, also talking to myself. Very bad about it. Very, very bad about it. But
if the shoe fits for the flirt,
oh well.
Yes, but I love your explanation so much. It's like if if putting that on your dating app profile feels right for you, then yeah, go ahead and do it. But I am also, I'll say for me, I don't put demisexual on my profile. I don't. And we're gonna get into boundaries and how to communicate boundaries here in the next part of the interview, because I allow, like, let me meet this person first. Let me see how the connection is. Let me just see how the energy is. Do they even seem like they're interested in getting to know me? Can they ask questions? Can they listen? Right? I just want to establish some really baseline elements of that connection first. And then I allow my boundaries and communicating my boundaries to really establish where I'm at when it comes to physical touch and when it comes to sex. And so that's sort of, yes, I think this is going to be so helpful. And now getting into some of the nuances of boundaries and communicating your boundaries. So
Mhm.
if you're dating, whether you're on the apps or not, you're going on dates or you're interested in it, how can you start to just let someone know where you're at, what you're comfortable with maybe outgoing without going into, on the first date, like, oversharing? Because
Yeah.
I know that's the flirties are asking that question in their heads right now.
Yeah, so I think like when you get to that conversation where it's like, all right, this connection feels like it could go someplace, or this connection feels like one I want to share this part of myself with, and I want this person to be a part of that part of my life. I
Mhm.
think the important thing is to, number one, have this conversation unapologetically. Like, don't approach this by apologizing for your
Mm.
identity.
Oh
We
my
have
God,
such a
yes.
tendency to apologize for ourselves as ace and arrow people. Like, we like, oh, this is going to be so hard for you to deal with. I'm sorry you have to put up with it. We don't have to apologize for that. We're just
Yeah.
sharing an important part of what makes us us. So
Yeah.
I feel like those conversations need to look like, hey, so this is going really well. I have a thing I want to share with you about myself, and talk about this with you because I think it could like come up in our relationship. I'm insert label here,
Mhm.
and then share what that means and looks like. I always think it's
Mhm.
important to kind of head off at the pass the misconceptions and stereotypes somebody may have in their head about
Yeah.
you. So if
Yeah.
I just leave asexual on the table for someone, who knows what they're going to imagine that means or that implies or that includes.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I say I'm asexual, and so here's what that looks like for me. This is what my relationships
Yes.
look like. These are my expectations. This is
Yes.
what I'm down for. This is what I'm not.
Yes.
That then empowers me, and me and my prospective partner can talk about that and what could happen in our relationship with all the
Yeah.
information on the table. And
Mhm.
that is empowering for everybody, and that's good for your relationship.
Mm. Yes. You get to voice all of that, including your expectations. And I love what you said here. It's like if you just put, let's say, asexuality on the table, well, then the other person it's, they may have a definition or an idea in their head of what that is, but what does it mean for you? What does it look like for you? And then it can become this really beautiful experience where you're developing intimacy, there's vulnerability, the connection is growing, it's evolving. And can really establish the foundation for a fantastic perhaps long-term relationship if that's what you're looking for and why you're dating. It's like for me it's yeah, I'm going to communicate just that, where maybe I say I'm demisexual early on, maybe I don't, but it's really important to me just to communicate where I'm at with physical touch. So if there's something I'm not comfortable with, if there's something I'm not quite ready for, if they're like after the first date come back to my place, I'm probably gonna say no because I know if I'm in that situation, it's gonna
Yeah.
be more difficult. I mean, if they're saying come back to my place and I say yes, I think we know probably what the
What
expectation
the expectation is.
is. Yeah. So why planning ahead a little bit, I'm not gonna put myself in those situations where I'm then gonna be like, oh gosh, maybe I'm gonna sacrifice my boundaries and do something that just doesn't feel right to me. Yeah, okay. I want to speak to now this experience a little bit that you may have out there dating, and that's rejection. And so it's you feel like a connection's going well. Let's just say, for example, you've been on 2 dates and now you're communicating that you're asexual or you're demisexual, whatever it may be, and the other person's like, oop, they're they they don't understand, or they don't try and understand, or they ghost or slow ghost or something like that. So speaking to the experience of rejection a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I think because of all the social messages that we get around being ace and arrow, that it
Mm,
is a brokenness, a deficiency, it's a problem
mhm.
with you, it is a problem to solve.
Yeah.
We internalize that notion a lot, that if we are rejected by someone, we assume it is our fault, that it is something that we did and that we are a problem. And
Mm,
we tend to internalize other people's rejection. I think it's really important for us to turn that internalization around. And if someone rejects you for being asexual, it's not that you did something wrong or your asexuality is a problem. That person just revealed that they were never going to be the right partner for you. Like
yes.
you dodged a bullet there, friend.
Mhm, mhm.
Their rejection doesn't change any truth about you, and it shouldn't change the way you think about yourself. A person is free to choose the kind of relationships they want. If you're not it, cool. that person was not right for you to begin with. It leaves you then free to find a person who will see your ace or arrow identity as a valid, worthy of celebrating part of you.
Yes. So good. Nothing to add. Nothing to add. Yeah, it's just you're very likely, regardless of how you identify, if you're dating. I mean, my God, rejection's a part of the process, and it goes both ways too, right? You get to decide if maybe someone is just maybe breadcrumbing you or not showing up, or it just seems like they're pushing you, they're not respecting your boundaries. You get to decide as well. You know what? Not for me.
Yeah,
Not for me.
And everyone experiences rejection,
100%.
no matter what their sexual or romantic orientation is. Like it's something that happens to every person, and there's no reason that we should put more weight on rejection in define and how that makes us feel about ourselves just because we're ace or arrow.
Yeah. I've got a kind of delicate question here, but I wanted to bring it up because it came through in speaking to the flirty that's experienced trauma in their life. And so they're untangling, right, the effects and just how their body responded and coped with the trauma, with now how they may identify asexual, their arrow, they're identifying with parts of this conversation. And so I'm not articulating this super well, but for the person that's also bringing some trauma into the dating process, how to maybe untangle their identity from the trauma, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I certainly think like we should always think of identity as a process. Because it changes over the course of our lives. Some folks may have more stable identity understandings of themselves over their lives, but we all, as we evolve and grow and understand ourselves better, or things happen to us, we shift the way that we think about ourselves. We shift the way we think about what's happening in our bodies and how we want to engage with the world in the body and head and heart that we have.
Yes.
So if it is a process of like untangling what that means, just be very gentle with yourself through this process. It is a process of change. Change is challenging, but change is a reality and not like change is something you should expect to happen over the course of your life.
Yeah.
Interestingly, in the ace and arrow communities, we have a bit of language to talk specifically about people who come to ace and arrow identities due to an experience of trauma. So like in our communities, that experience is something that not common, but has been experienced by enough people that language was created for it. So it's cade sexual and cade romantic. And both of those terms describe people who arrive at an ace or arrow identity due to the experience of trauma. Okay. So within asexuality, there is room to understand yourself that way. If trauma does change the pattern of your experience, and you do find that ace now really connects to you, and you find community and safety and space there and self-understanding there, then that's where you should be. There are no like requirements for entry in the ace or arrow communities. If your experience, whatever your experience is, however you arrive at an ace or arrow experience, if you're having an ace and arrow experience, you belong in that space.
Can you say those two terms again? Cade sexuality and
cade sexual and cade romantic are the two terms, one for ace and one for arrow.
Fantastic. That's so interesting. I just learned something brand new. Right here on Flirtations, y'all are pioneers. Your communities are doing the work for all of us.
Yeah, there's so like cade sexual and cade romantic are part of like the micro labels that exist in the ace and arrow communities, and sometimes they get a bad rap because there are a lot of them. But I think they are a very interesting creative output of the ace and arrow communities. I think so much of our language around understanding sexual orientation, relationships, romantic orientation have to do with people who do experience those things. Yes. Ace and arrow folks existing outside of those experiences are creating entirely new languages for how we might describe or classify or quantify what it means to belong in a community or relate to those experiences. And I think it's like magically queer and really beautiful. And while I don't necessarily use them myself, I'm very glad that they are all there.
Gosh. Me too. Me too. Helping, I mean, really insanely helpful. I want to ask this question now that came through for a flirty who says she is, I think a she, wants, it doesn't matter, that is in a relationship, exploring a relationship with someone who identifies as ace. And
Mhm.
so as asking like, I've never dated someone that's ace before. How can I support them?
Be curious, ask questions. If there are things you don't understand about their identity or how it expresses itself or what might show up, have a conversation. Be curious. What does
Yeah.
being ace mean to you? What does being ace look like to you? Ask very specifically, what are the best ways that I can support you and make you
Mm,
feel like your identity is affirmed by me?
yeah.
And make sure that is an ongoing conversation. Let that be something that exists as an open door in your relationship to talk through. So if some component of their aceness challenges them more at this time than another time, they're
Hmm.
comfortable talking to you about it.
Mm,
And let them lead you toward the best way to be affirming. Um,
yes.
Curiosity is such a powerful tool in forming deeper connections. So
Hmm.
be curious, be gently and
Hmm.
kindly curious.
Yes. I love curiosity as okay, we've got a little bit more time here. A few more questions coming. Got to ask you about flirting now. So for let's maybe for the ace person, the arrow person, some flirting tips, or do you think like 'cause I talk about the flirt that's all about connection first and foremost, and then you layer it, you evolve it, you grow it from there, right? Take it in several many directions. But how you think is flirting different for the ace and arrow person, or is it maybe the same?
I mean, I think for those of for I mean, so I'm just going to speak through from my own experience because that's the one that I know the most intimately. It's not
Mhm.
very different for me.
Okay.
Like, I feel like I'm still trying to form those like fun initial connections in the same kind of ways as
Yes.
my partners did when we first kind of connected.
Okay.
Um, but I certainly think like for making sure that you're confident that you're not scared to possibly reveal the truth of who you are or reveal the truth of who you are. Let what your aceness has made you be part of how you flirt and engage and
Yes.
connect and share yourself. um
Yes.
I think like I know the very when I first came out, I was afraid of anybody finding out. Like I wanted to keep it like major top secret because I just was
Uh,
afraid of like rejection and I was afraid of what people would think. And
mm-hmm.
um as I've gotten more comfortable and it is now, I just see it as part of my life. I notice that it sort of shows up in like jokes I may make or like funny like ways of kind of approaching somebody's like flirt to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let it become part of who you be happy, be proud of it. And let it
Yes.
become part of how you share yourself, even
Mm,
if you're not doing the ACE 101 PowerPoint. Like just
right.
let it be part of how you share yourself in that like fun and joyful way.
Absolutely. Because thank you. Because this question came through from a flirty who says they identify as ace and they feel like they can't flirt or they have to hold back. Like maybe they don't want to lead someone on or they have to flirt in a certain way. And I'm like, no. Flirt
No.
it up. Flirt it up.
Yeah.
We're making connections, no expectations.
Yeah.
In the present moment, all of that stuff. I see you, you see me. Let's share some energy, smile, have a good time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Like you don't have to worry about like solving the possible end of a
Yes.
relationship in the first like 10 minutes.
Yes.
Let yourself have fun, be yourself, and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the demisexual flirty who might get themselves into trouble from time to time. I mean, we've all been there. I've been there. So just know like if you are setting yourself up for a situation where you're going to meet someone, like you're going to go on a date with them and you were like really hot and heavy in the flirt, just know that they may expect it wouldn't be so out of the norm or out of this world for them to expect like, oh, it's going down. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like if you set up expectations, at least be aware that you set up the expectations and
Hmm.
then be comfortable, but also be comfortable setting boundaries and like
Yes.
engaging in like you only do what you need, what you consent to.
That part.
Um,
Yes.
if you can do both of those things, yeah, like go for it. Have the hot flirt. Like,
Yes.
one, it's really fun.
Let that inner flirt run wild. Okay, I've got really I think just two more questions here, and this one is about support resources. Just I'll send the flirties your way to your book and to your social channels. But where someone can find support. They want more knowledge. They're curious. Community. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, certainly online is a really incredible place for that. Any of the major social media platforms have a lot of ace and arrow content creators who are making things about being ace and arrow and forming community. It's a great way to engage and find other people. The Asexual Visibility and Education Network, AVEN, their website, asexuality.org, is a great hub with message boards and ways for people to find each other and connect with each other. There aren't a ton of ways to sort of meet ace people in the world. We don't have like ace bars or anything that are regularly showing up in places yet.
Right.
But checking out your local LGBTQ center and seeing if they have ace meetups, or can point you in the direction of where ace folks are maybe gathering for meetups. I know in cities around the country there are ace meetups where people are going out and doing stuff and forming community that way. But like starting online is a great place. You can find other people who are sharing their experiences, and you can find some online solidarity.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll have some things linked in the show notes as well. And I think really this has been such an incredible conversation. I'm really, really happy to bring it to the flirties. Just any final words of wisdom, parting gifts you may want to offer the flirties, anything that didn't come up in conversation today?
No, I just the two things that are always really important for me. One, asexuality and aromanticism are not a brokenness. You're not missing something. You're not a broken version of something. It is just part of the spectrum of ways that people romantically and sexually express themselves as human beings. And like, do it unapologetically. If ace and arrow, it makes sense for you and that's where you want to be, go into that experience and live that unapologetically. Our lives are filled with all the same kinds of possibilities and all the same kinds of opportunities that any other sexual orientation or romantic orientation has.
Yes.
Live your truth as unapologetically as possible. Build the relationships you want and desire. Ask for what you want because you deserve it. Live unapologetically.
Obsessed with that message. I'm putting it on a post-it right now. I'm hanging it on my mirrors. I can see it everywhere. This has been absolutely incredible. Cody Daigle-Orians, thank you so much for being part of the show today, sharing yourself with the flirties.
This was so much fun. Thank you for inviting me. I had a great time.
Flirties, that's a wrap on this episode of Flirtations. Thank you so much to our guest for this conversation, Cody Daigle-Orians, for sharing so much information, wisdom, and insight into what it means to be ace, arrow, and or demi, right? So incredible. I hope you got so much value from this conversation. Come back to it again. This is a resource that will always be here for you, as none of this truly is black and white, cut and dry, one way or the other. And so I hope this was a really just empowering and helpful conversation in allowing you to perhaps understand yourself better or understand yourself in brand new ways today. So thank you to Cody. Thank you to you, the flirties, for listening, for tuning in, for streaming wherever you may be in the world. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I could not do this without you. I truly could not. Thank you so much. Please, yes, rate, review, subscribe to the show if you haven't already. It means so much to me. Helps me grow the show, continue to have such amazing guests on. Share this with a friend, a family, a coworker, a neighbor, someone you want to share some BFE, big flirt energy with. All right, I've said all the things. That'll do it for me. Signing off officially here at Flirt Headquarters. My name is Benjamin. I'm the flirt coach and gay Libra flirty. Happy flirting.